Hey y'all, so the Iowa caucuses are next week, Monday, February 3rd. So I figured I would share with you my thoughts on the state of the race so far. Now I have to make a couple of stipulations, starting with this is going to be longer than 2 minutes and 20 seconds, but I'm going to post the first 2 minutes and 20 seconds on Twitter, and y'all can click on my YouTube channel and finish watching the rest. I know half y'all only gonna watch the first 20 seconds and you're not even watching anymore anyway. And if I did the threads, y'all wouldn't even watch the rest of the video. So click on the YouTube channel link if you want to see what else I have to say. That's number one. Number two, I don't have a candidate among this field, okay? So don't be mad at me. Don't think I'm favoring one person over another. I'm really not. Trust me on that, okay? If you don't like my opinion, then I don't know what to do for you, okay? I'm not trying to convince you of shit. This is not an endorsement of any person that I interpret anything of. And I'm not making predictions here. I'm just providing analysis and my opinion. All right, so let's go through this. Now, what I have in front of me is I have different polling averages and different data points. So I'm going to be talking about national polling averages, statewide polling averages. Then I have the 538 delegate forecast that they're doing. And I have a 270 to win delegate calculator as well. So those are the different data points. I'm not just talking out of my asshole. For those of y'all that think I just sit up there and I don't. I do have educated opinions. So before I get to that, if you're still watching, I got my champagne of beers here, Miller Lite. Let's get started. So nationally, this is where we're at. A week before Iowa. In the polling averages, you have Biden at 28%, Sanders at 23%, Warren at 15%, I'm rounding, Bloomberg at 8%. Bloomberg is in fourth place now. He has supplanted Pete Buttigieg for fourth place. Pete Buttigieg is at 7%, Gang is at 5%, Klobuchar is at 4.3%, Cyrus at 2%, Gabbard is at 1%. Go ahead, drop out, boo. So that's what we're looking at nationally, but we do not have a national race. We have state by state races. The first one, again, like I mentioned earlier, is in Iowa. Now, I do want to point out, I've been telling y'all, stop sleeping on Bloomberg and don't let Sanders run away with this race. So let's move on to Iowa. So Iowa's the first contest. Now, typically, so much weight has been put on the Iowa caucuses. You know, even though it's a super white ass state, and you would think you would want a state that's more reflective of the electorate to go first. No, we're not doing that. So we have Iowa. Now I'm trying to figure out how all these fools done had these candidates in Iowa for all this goddamn time, and they still talking about they're undecided. What more do you want from these people? I'm sick of Iowa. I would be happy if I would just be able just to have to not even hear about Iowa for another goddamn 4 years. But Iowa, this is the state of the race. And now, the polling averages that I have in front of me, which is Real Clear Politics, doesn't have every single poll, okay? But in the polls that they have reflected here, Sanders is in the lead. He's polling first. Now, it's a very close race. 25% for Sanders, 22% for Biden, 17% for Buttigieg, falling under the 15% threshold. So what you have to do in order to be viable to get any delegates for any of these races is you have to get 15% or more of the vote to get any delegates awarded. Warren has seen quite a precipitous fall. She's polling at 13.5% polling averages right now in Iowa. Klobuchar has, in some polls, gone above Elizabeth Warren. There's a particular one for the Emerson where she's polling at 13% and Warren is polling at 11%. Now, 11%. Interestingly enough, in that poll, Sanders is polling much higher at 30%. So it looks like that whole tiff that Sanders and Warren got into, the people went with Sanders. That's unfortunate. You know, because a woman should be able to call out sexism and not pay a penalty for it. But that's what we're dealing with in 2020, child. So, Amy Klobuchar benefits, so does Bernie Sanders. But in the polling averages, Warren is actually at 13.5% in Iowa, and Amy Klobuchar is at 8.5%. So I don't know if she's having a surge or she has a couple of good polls. Then you have Andrew Yang at 3%, Tom Steyer 2.8%, Gabbard at 2%. So that's the state of the race in Iowa. Now, Iowa is a caucus system. So what can happen is the candidates that are not viable, their people can choose to caucus with another candidate. So it's basically like, think of it as multiple ballot rounds. It's all in the open. So there was a college that actually did a mock caucus. I think it was Drake University in Iowa. And interestingly enough, Warren placed first in that one. And the Bernie people were just, they will refuse to budge. So they did not go to another candidate, even though he didn't meet the threshold. So these are the kind of dynamics that come into play in Iowa that make it a little bit more interesting. So some people suspect that, or expect, or maybe they hope that, for instance, Amy Klobuchar voters will go to Elizabeth Warren. Now, I've seen some second choice polling data on that doesn't really support that conclusion. It seems like people are more so inclined to go to Biden and Buttigieg over Warren. But, she's going to need Amy Klobuchar's voters, or the other way is Amy Klobuchar could be viable and Elizabeth Warren won't, and then it's a question of where her voters will go to. So there are a lot of variables. It's all about turnout. There's been some controversy about how the Iowa caucuses are not very friendly to the disabled community. So, that's a suppression aspect. There's also controversy about how, the caucuses require a long time commitment. So that's a suppressive force for people who are working class and things like that. So whatever happens out of Iowa, you can expect a whole lot of excuses. And the likelihood of it whittling the field down very much is probably not very high. Except for the people that are still hanging out there like Michael Bennett. What are you running for? Or Deval Patrick, I don't know. He hasn't even, I don't think he's even trying in Iowa. So I don't think that Iowa is quite the game changer that it would normally be, unless there's like just a complete shocker, blowout result with, nobody's going to accept Bernie Sanders as the presumptive nominee just off of Iowa. Okay. They only have 41 goddamn delegates, and there's probably going to be just a handful of delegates separating these candidates, regardless of what the margins are in terms of the percentages. So, enough about Iowa. Let's move on. Then we have the first primaries, which is in New Hampshire. Okay, that takes place a week after Iowa. It's February 11th. And in between Iowa and New Hampshire, you do have a presidential debate, which Tom Steyer has now, not Tom Steyer, but Andrew Yang is qualified for. It's interesting how that Michael Bloomberg is rising in the polls off of commercials and being uncontested. Now some of the candidates are starting to say they want to see him in the debate because he should have to answer to the American public. Told y'all to stop sleeping on him. So we'll see if those rules change. But that could be something in addition to the results of Iowa that swings the pendulum a little bit, a strong performance or a bad performance there. So let's see what we have in New Hampshire. Right now in New Hampshire, we have Bernie Sanders at 24% in the lead. Then we have Joe Biden at 16%. Then we have Pete Buttigieg at 14.8%. Then we have Warren at 13%. So this is two contests back to back where Warren is polling on average in fourth place and under the delegate threshold. And shockingly enough, New Hampshire is the backyard of Massachusetts. So it should really be troubling to Warrenistas that she's not performing well in New Hampshire. This should have been a slam dunk for her, but it is what it is with that. Then you have Amy Klobuchar at 7%. Then you have Tulsi Gabbard at 4.8%. Andrew Yang at 4.7%. Tom Steyer 2.3%. Michael Bennett, who should have dropped out after he didn't get shit in Iowa, is over here in New Hampshire at 0.7%. Now, the question is going to remain after these contests, who is going to be pushed the fuck out the race. Okay. Now, I don't see Andrew Yang feeling particularly pressured to get out of the race because of Iowa and because of New Hampshire. He has funding. I don't know what exactly his goal is here. I'm not anti-Yang, to be clear. Don't get all fucking sensitive because I said I don't know what his goal is. But he has some pretty decent numbers in California, not above the viability threshold. But like I said, I don't see much incentive for him to drop out prior to California. So, but I do think that, let's say if Sanders has 2 first place finishes, again, these are not a lot of delegates that we're talking about. There's 41 delegates in Iowa, 24 delegates in New Hampshire. There's not going to be a big delegate spread in terms of the margin. But with the media, there could be some panic. Not so much with the media, but I mean with the Democratic Party, okay? So what what is going to result from that panic? Is that going to result in people saying, oh shit, we got to move to the people that are viable, to the people that are getting delegates, and we got to make sure that we wrap this up? Or is it going to add to Bernie's momentum? There's a lot of variables at play. I'm not making predictions, okay? I'm only making observations. So moving on from New Hampshire. Then we have the, oh shit, did I get my stuff out of order? Nevada. Okay, Nevada's another caucus, and that's February 22nd. That one has 36 delegates, okay? Now, the polling averages here, this is the first contest where Joe Biden is in the lead in the polling averages. Now, he's seen some slippage from an earlier poll in November, November, where he was in the 30s range. Now he's in 25% polling average, okay? Bernie Sanders is at 19.3% polling average. Elizabeth Warren is in third place this time, so she gets a little bit of a reprieve there with 14.7%. Then you have Buttigieg at 7.7%, Steyer at 7.3%, Yang at 3%, Klobuchar at 2.7%. Booker, I don't know what he's still doing in the averages, whatever. Anyway, moral of the story is this is a decent number for Steyer, still not above the threshold of viability. That's somebody I really don't understand what the hell he's doing, okay? Because he spent all this money and he really only has 2 contests that he's even remotely getting some sort of percentages in. But I guess he just has money to burn, set on fire with all these commercials. Pete Buttigieg, though, he's pretty low here. This is 8% to 4th place. So, you know, does the stampede start away or stop? You know, does the stampede start going to other candidates who are Buttigieg supporters, or for Klobuchar? Now, she's pretty low in Nevada. Those are some of the questions that you have to wonder about this data. But this is caucus data, and it's New Nevada. So moving along. Let's talk about South Carolina. Now, South Carolina is what a lot of people will consider the black state, okay? Because black people make up a large portion of the electorate here. So, this is excellent news for Joe Biden, who is absolutely far ahead of the rest of the pack here. This contest is on February 29th. It has 54 delegates. In the lead here is Joe Biden with 32%. You have, now this is the polling averages. Sanders at 15%, Elizabeth Warren with 14%, Tom Steyer with 8.3%, Buttigieg with 6.3%, etc. on down, okay? Klobuchar is at 1.3%. So the question becomes, let's say hypothetically speaking, you have 3 second place finishes or third place finishes from Joe Biden, okay? In the other contests. What happens when he wins the first contest? Now, y'all may not recall, but in 2016, I recall, this is my interpretation, but I recall Bernie Sanders kind of poo-pooing the black-ass states, you know, the southern states. It was like, oh, well, you know, I can win the Midwest. Hey, what you really meant was the white voters, okay? So he might point to, look at my wins in the whiter states. That's worth more. You know, they have the whole 3/5 mentality. I said it. So I could see a lot of poo-pooing of South Carolina. Well, it's the black states. We know black motherfuckers are going to vote for whoever the Democrat is anyway. Vote no matter who. And so I can see where Biden's win here could be minimized. I don't agree with that. But that's what I can see from the mainstream media. It depends on which way they want to go. You know, they're very fickle. Okay. But again, this is looking like a 3rd or 4th place finish for Elizabeth Warren. So where does she go from here? If she's at 14%, she's not getting any delegates. Okay. So Elizabeth Warren at some point need a surge tail between these 4 contests. Or is the surge likely to happen when she's placing 3rd or 4th place? I don't know. But if she pulls off a miracle and vastly overperforms her polling position in Iowa, she might get a little bit momentum. You know, she's got some endorsements. Her and Amy Klobuchar have an endorsement from the New York Times. Amy has some endorsements in Iowa. So you never know. I don't know. I'm not predicting. I'm not psychic. But South Carolina could spell some doom for Elizabeth Warren Even though let me be clear, because South Carolina is February 29th, and then you start to go into Super Tuesday, there's very little incentive for somebody to drop out just off the strength of South Carolina. But it could lead to very favorable media coverage or very negative media coverage. So the main state that we have polling data for in terms of Super Tuesday is California. That's on March 3rd, a massive pop. Now, to date, we've been talking about 50 delegates, 20 delegates, 40 delegates. California has 416 delegates. So this is going to be a very consequential race in terms of the delegate race, because what these candidates need to get to the nomination is 1,990 pledged delegates, which is delegates from these contests. All right. There will be no super delegates voting on the first ballot, thanks to Bernie Sanders and all the reforms that he pushed for. So you got to get to 1990. Well, California is a great place to really put a dent into your margins. Now, here's what we're looking at in California. The polling average is here. Bernie Sanders is at 24.3% in the polling average. First place. Biden is at 23%. Now, these polls have been all over the place, but I'm just going off the polling averages. 23% for Biden. 21% for Warren in the polling averages. She seems to have been pretty steady here. Then you have Buttigieg, that's at 7%. Then you have Michael Bloomberg, that's coming in now at 4.3%. Klobuchar at 3.7%. Yang is at 3.7%. Steyer's at 3%. So this is spread around a little bit more. Now, at Warren, it's do or die on Super Tuesday that she has to get some decent amount of delegates. She has to, in my view, not just play second or third, but she has to start winning some damn contests. Because how do you justify staying in the race? How do you justify being viable? How do you continue to raise money? And you ain't won none of these contests yet. Zero. So, not a prediction. I'm not trying to push her ass out. I'm just saying this is how the math tells you. I do think that Bloomberg, I am a little bullish on Bloomberg, not an endorsement, but Bloomberg's strategy of ads only plus a massive staff has really paid dividends for him. The polling averages are not as generous to him because there's some earlier polls than some of the newer polls coming out. And some of the newer polls, he's actually moved into third place nationally. He's doing really well. He's definitely polling ahead of Buttigieg in many of the polls that are coming out in the last couple of days. We're starting to see a much bigger increase in polling activity. So I'm a little bit more bullish on Bloomberg than other people are. I've said from the beginning, and I can't take all the credit for it because my dad was the one who was like, yeah, Michael Bloomberg could win. And I was like, what? No. And then when he told me about it, I was like, you're right. He could. Oh my God. So I've been telling y'all this since December, okay? Ain't nobody listen to me. So Bloomberg, I'm still going to say is a wild card because, we have the Super Bowl, which is Sunday. He has a massive ad, and his ads have been pretty good, not an endorsement. So that's the kind of stuff that seems to have been moving the needle in Bloomberg's favor. Now, Steyer's done all kinds of ads, but his ads suck ass. So that's why nobody's really impressed with him, except for in South Carolina, where he's spending a lot more time on the ground and things like that. So that's California. Now, I don't have a whole lot of polls, so I'm going to move on to the next part, which is the 538 calculator. I'm going to just speed through this. All right. So based on these forecasted outcomes, now this forecast, it's taking into account people that are expected to drop out. It's taking into account polling bumps or bumps that you get from winning a contest or drops that you get from losing and things like that. It's very sophisticated. 538. You can look it up there. But based on the current state of the race, the forecast is that Biden, on average, gets 1,581 pledged delegates. You need 1,990. You have Bernie Sanders. Now, his pledged delegate count has been going up significantly since they first started putting this out. He's at 1,318. Still not 1,990. You have Warren at 486. And you have Buttigieg at 392. Now, That's what this delegate math is showing. It doesn't take into account Bloomberg, which I will circle back around to that. Now, what this says is currently the forecast for 538 has each candidate's chance of winning more than half the pledged delegates. So it has Joe Biden at 40% chance of winning more than half of the pledged delegates. 40%. Sanders, 31%. That is too fucking close for comfort. Okay, it's too much. And I'm not endorsing Joe Biden. I'm just saying. Didn't I tell y'all motherfuckers that Bernie Sanders is somebody y'all need to watch? And y'all said, oh no, Joe shouldn't punch down and this, that, and the other. Now this motherfucker's gaining on your asses. Should have listened. I've been knowing what I'm talking about sometimes. Okay. Now, the next highest probability is that nobody gets more than half of pledged delegates. Now, goddamn, that sounds like a contested convention to me, unless some wheeling and dealing happens before the convention. Below the chances of nobody getting the more than half the pledged delegates is Elizabeth Warren. Shit. She's down to only 7% chance of her getting more than half of the pledged delegates. Pete Buttigieg is right behind her with 6%. And then all others are 0.4%. That's what the forecast is saying. Don't shoot the messenger. I think people should definitely not to get comfortable in this race, though. Nobody should. And what I think, again, this is just my personal opinion, stepping away from the data and the forecast and all that fancy shit. I think that Bloomberg is underrated in this because we don't have a lot of polling data in the states, in all these states that Bloomberg has been on the airways for. This motherfucker is on the radio. I was listening to the Russ Parr Morning Show. He on the radio. He on the morning radio. He on the afternoon radio. He got commercials. And nobody is contesting him on these airwaves all throughout the country. He is spending bank, okay? I think that you can't underestimate the value of him being uncontested in all these places, and we don't have any polling. A lot of people seem to be open to him. That's anecdotal evidence, okay? Plus the polling surge that we're starting to see. I don't think you can really count out Michael Bloomberg. He got some really good numbers in this New York poll where he was second place and he was viable. New York has a very significant amount of delegates as well. So there are places where he has delegates that he can, pick up where he starts to become a little bit more viable, and particularly in a contested convention. My thoughts is in a contested convention, Bloomberg could potentially emerge on the second ballot because he would have presumably, and I'm making assumptions here, quite a bit of superdelegate support. I mean, Michael Bloomberg has been making it rain all throughout the country, child. So I think he will have a lot of superdelegate support, people that want to win their goddamn race, who want to be funded for the rest of their lives by a super obscenely rich billionaire. I wouldn't be mad. I'd be like, cut the check. But then that's corrupt in politics, right? Don't hate the player. You're just a player in the game, right? So, I'm like I said, I wouldn't count out Bloomberg. I'm not saying he's going to be the nominee, but I'm just saying none of these things are picking up on his potential strength. Let's move on to the last thing, and I'm going to wrap this shit up. If you still even watching, all three of y'all, this is a 271 Democratic delegate calculator. So what this says is based on the polling of the different states where it's known, these are the delegates that they expect people to pick up, all right? So, right, and they have the national polling averages. So it's not prorated based on the national polling averages. What's happening is it's summing up the states. So 270 to win. It's a 2020 Democratic delegate calculator. You can look at it for yourself. It has Biden at 1,508. Again, not 1,990. It has Sanders at 762. Elizabeth Warren is kind of down there at 277. And you have Michael Bloomberg at 0. Buttigieg at 46%. 46 delegates. Andrew Yang is at 0. Klobuchar is at 28 delegates. And Tom Steyer is at 15. This is what the polling is saying in the states that we know have polling. That's what it's saying, that the polling averages indicate the delegates will be. Now, if there's no polls, then there's no numbers in here. Okay, so that's not to say that adds up to the total number of pledged delegates, but that's what it's saying. So these are all the different sources. I've told you the data. I've given you my interpretation of it. You can take it or leave. You can agree, not agree. Don't matter to me. It's not going to make a difference. I'm not here to convince y'all shit. I'm just here to tell you this is the data that I have. And you can go from there. We're going to find out starting next week where we really are with this goddamn never-ending primary. So I'll be back. And maybe I'll do one after Iowa. Who knows? I don't know. But I will be back talking shit and telling y'all my opinion. And y'all talk shit with me too. Okay? See ya.